Very good morning, all of you. It's a great delight to see you all this morning in Untitled Global University, Sonipat, in our campus. And I'm particularly thankful to the three schools, the Untitled Modern School, Hisar, it came all the way from there. The Apollo International School, Sonipat, and the Scholar Services School, Rohtak. So I think these are the three schools representing three different districts and important places, important cities of Haryana. And it's all our pleasure to welcome you all here. This university is indeed a pride institution of the country, but also importantly Haryana state. And we have our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor C. Kumar, talking to you about changing the world through law. So without any further delay, I'd like to invite Professor Raj.
A very good morning to all of you.
Good morning, sir.
Is that better?
Well, first of all, I want to really thank you for being here because I believe today happens to be your schools are closed or so all of you are having a holiday today. And you have chosen to come to our campus to celebrate your holiday. But I want to say this, that you are truly amazing kids because you have sacrificed your holiday to come and be part of us. And that's how you're going to make yourself successful. Because nobody can attain success without sacrifice. So the fact that you have sacrificed a day's holiday and have chosen to come to our campus is going to be an important opportunity for you to think about your future. So once again, welcome to O.P. Jindal Global University. I want to also begin by saying that this university was set up with a vision to transform higher education in India. The goal was to build a world-class university in India. Our Chancellor and benefactor, Mr. Naveen Jindal, had this strong commitment to nation building. And the idea was to create a university that will cater to the aspirations of young people of India, young people of Haryana, and young people of the world as well. So briefly to introduce myself, I want you to know that I am from a place called Kanyakumari. Have you heard of Kanyakumari? So I belong to Kanyakumari and I did my early schooling in Kanyakumari, and after which I did my most of my high school in Chennai in the state of Tamil Nadu. And then I came to Delhi to do my law degree at the Campus Law Center Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. After which I got the Rhodes Scholarship to go to the University of Oxford, where I did my master's in law. That was the year 1998. And when I was a student at Oxford, as a young student of law, I dreamt about the idea of building a university in India. That was 20 years ago. And I felt that India needs universities like Oxford, like the world's best universities. After which I got 3 more fellowships to go to another university called the Harvard University in the United States. I did my master's, another master's in law from Harvard Law School at Harvard University in the United States. And then I practiced law in New York, and I taught law in Japan, and I taught law for many years in Hong Kong. And then in 2006, I got to meet with Mr. Jindal and persuaded Mr. Jindal to do 3 things. One, to make a substantial financial commitment to build a world-class university as a tribute to his father. Second, to make a commitment to doing it in a not-for-profit manner. And third, to essentially ensure academic freedom and autonomy and independence to build a world-class university in India. With that vision, we started the journey in the year 2009, and today we are just celebrating our 10th anniversary, and we started with only one school, the Jindal Global Law School, and 100 students and 10 faculty members, and today we have 8 schools: the law school, the business school, the School of International Affairs, the School of Public Policy, the School of Liberal Arts, the School of Journalism, the School of Architecture, the School of Banking and Finance. All these 8 schools and so many different programs, and over 5,100 students and over 500 full-time faculty members, all working here on this campus. So I'm very, very delighted to have all of you be here to celebrate our 10th anniversary and to talk to you about your own future, and to have you think about your future in ways that you may not have imagined about in the past. Now I'm going to walk around, so I'm going to come near you as well. I'll have the other mic. Okay. All right, so, okay. First, let me ask you this. How many of you among this group of students would like to become a lawyer? Raise your hand, please. Okay, excellent. There are 2 of you. How many of you would like to become a business professional? All right. BBA, BCom type programs, BA Economics Honors, those type of programs. Okay. How many of you would like to, go into, let's say, international relations, like, United Nations type jobs, UN type jobs? Anybody? Okay. Are there people who want to become doctors here?
Video. For video.
Are there people who want to become a doctor here? Engineers? Engineer aspirations? 1 or 2. All right. Okay. Well, there are lots of interesting career options. So I want to start by saying that I want to briefly talk about changing the world through law, but I also want to talk about changing the world through education. Because, and that's, since all of you are going to pursue different career options in the future, it's important for you to have a sense of higher education as you think about the future. Let me first say that what is law? Let's ask the most fundamental question, all right? Who wants to answer that? What is law? Anybody? What is law? Any volunteer? Come on, you should be able to tell what is law. You're all very smart people. I know you know the answer. Anybody can give me any response. What is law? The moment I utter the word law, what comes into your mind? Who said that? Fantastic. Please raise your hand. What's your name? Chanj. What did you say? Law is rules and regulations. Great answer. What else? Louder, louder. Sorry?
Governing principles.
Governing principles. Fantastic. What's your name? Okay, well, another very good response. What else?
Common sense.
That's a good one. Who said that? Absolutely. What's your name? You heard that? Common sense. At the heart of it, law is also about common sense. What else?
University applied.
Oh, beautiful. Universally applied principles. Yes, great.
Rules made for development of individuals of a country.
Wow, even better. Rules made for the development of individuals of a country. Even better. Great. What else? Come on, all of you here. Guidelines we must follow. Excellent. Very good. Which can't be changed. We'll talk about it. But, laws get changed, right? Some laws which used to exist before, But it used to be the case that laws can't be changed. But now, laws have been changed and can be changed. But it's a good response. What What else?
Legal obligations.
Legal obligations. Okay, very good. What else?
The laws are the restriction which tell a person to do anything before doing anything.
Oh, that's a very good one. Laws impose some sort of restrictions and limitations on people before they do something. Very good. Very thoughtful. What else?
Punishable if defied.
Sorry?
Punishable if defied.
I didn't hear you what?
Punishable if defied.
Punishable, absolutely. So law has what we call the power of sanction. If you don't follow the law, you're going to have sanctions associated with it. Very good. What else?
Keeper of justice.
Sorry? Keeper of justice. Exactly. I didn't hear that word. Nobody uttered the word. Justice. Law is indeed the keeper of justice. Very good. What else?
So law is something that binds a nation from criminal acts.
Fantastic. So law binds the nation from criminal behavior and other sorts of deviant behavior. Very good.
So constraints to live with freedom.
Oh, absolutely amazing. So law imposes constraints to, exercise of freedom. Very good. Very good.
Freedom with responsibility.
Freedom with responsibility. Amazing. What an amazing set of responses. What else? Anybody left out? Well, give yourself a good, hands, good set of hands. Come on. You deserve an amazing set of applause. Come on, louder. So you have been absolutely amazing because all those responses you said are absolutely accurate. Law is an important social institution that pretty much everything that you said, it protects rights, it protects freedoms, it creates restrictions. If you don't follow it, if you violate it, there are, consequences for it. So in a way, all the responses that you said is very important. So one of the things that I intend to do in the next, say, half an hour, and then we'll have a Q&A session, is that to explain to you the larger empowering dimension of law and why law becomes a critical tool in the context of our evolution. So in some ways, one of the most foundational objectives of law is to build a society that is based upon fairness, a society that is based upon a sense of justice, as somebody said. Now, of course, the most difficult part of building that society which is fair and just is also how do you determine what is fair and what is just. So one of the big challenges of law is how do you determine what is fair and what is just. So talking about the more fundamental dimensions of law, or at least to say why we even need law in a society, is that if we don't have law in society, we are inevitably going to be governed by individual whims and fancies so that they may potentially exercise their powers in an arbitrary manner. They may abuse their powers. So one of the purposes, goals, objectives of law is to build a society that is based upon the principle of equality and non-discrimination, meaning we should have a society where we are all treated equally. Now, the moment I say we should have a society where all of us should be treated equally, the immediate response that you should have is that we are not equal. All of us are not equal. Some of us are rich, some of us are poor, some of us are in the middle class situation, some of us have all our limbs working, some of us are disabled, some of us have other challenges, some of us have, some of us come from different types of, background, economic, social, and other types. Of course, we are not equal. So how do we treat unequal people equally? We cannot, right? Because these are indeed unequal people. So then law also creates provisions for people
to be treated differently. That doesn't mean they are discriminated. So, in a way, law comes out with another principle that if you are unequal, then you can be treated differently. If you are unequal for whatever reasons, you can be treated differently. In fact, it even says that if you treat unequal people equally, you are actually perpetuating inequality. You understand? If you treat unequal people equally, you are actually perpetuating inequality. So now I'll give you an example. You're all students. You know, there are students who suffer from some sort of disability in writing as well. So for example, even in our CBSE, but also others, if you as a student get to have, say, 2 hours to write an exam or 3 hours, the students who suffer from that challenge are given 4 hours or 5 hours. They can have a scribe who can write for them. Now, you can't argue, oh, you know, I'm not being treated equally. Of course you're not being treated equally because you and that other person are already unequally placed. Treating you both equally will mean treating that person unequally. So this is a very important principle that I want you to understand. The principle of equality, which is one of the cardinal and fundamental principles of equality. In fact, if you talk about Indian Constitution, Article 14 of the Constitution of India talks about the right to equality. And it is one of the most contested provisions of the Constitution. And there are numerous debates surrounding this particular provision and its implications. And we'll go in our Q&A session, we'll talk about it. For example, reservation policy. Should reservation be given to people belonging to scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, OBCs? It's one of the most contested aspects of our constitution, which is the right to equality. And if we do give, should we give protection of minorities, for example? Should, minorities should be allowed to have special privileges in education institutions? Should the power of the minorities should be allowed to promote such things? All those things come under the broader gamut of the right to equality. We'll come back in a Q&A session. The second thing I want to talk about is the principle of the rule of law. And that's something which I want you to really grapple with. The principle of rule of law talks about however high you are, the law is above you. Meaning that you can be the Prime Minister, the President, the richest person in the world, richest person in India, the most powerful individual, whatever. However high you are, the law is above you. And that principle of rule of law is the most fundamental principle that governs all democratic societies. The principle of the rule of law. Now, of course, you may ask me, yes, but that's a good theoretical proposition. In practice, that may not be the case. I agree with you, even in our own country, but also other countries. While this principle of rule of law is an aspiration principle wherein we want to ensure that every society where law is in practice, the law holds the highest level of recognition, and individuals who may have different powers, different clout, different political power, different designations, different levels of wealth, they all accept that the law is above them. So the principle of rule of law is so central to democratic societies. You cannot develop a democratic society without recognizing the principle of the rule of law. Now then, another important principle which is important to recognize is the concept of access to justice. I mean, some of you said that one of the purposes and goals of law is to ensure justice. It's not just about having the law. It's about ultimately helping us achieve justice. So the question that we have before us is, how do we achieve justice? How do we achieve justice through law? So with a view to achieving justice through law, we have established institutions such as the courts. In our country, we have the different courts that operate across India, the district courts, the magistracy courts, and also the high courts, and then ultimately the Supreme Court of India. So the purpose of these institutions are to ensure that the law in the books is ultimately implemented and ensured the implementation of it. And if it doesn't, the courts as an institution serve as a way by which they can implement these. Now, this becomes a very difficult task for courts to do because a lot of people are aggrieved. A lot of people may suffer from different forms of injustices, and they expect to approach the court of law to seek justice. So, in a way, the most important institution that has acquired greater importance in our country but also in other democracies is the courts themselves. If you remember, several years ago, when George Bush became the president of United States of America, the Supreme Court of US finally had to decide the case which made sure that Al Gore, who was his contestant, did not become the president and George Bush became the president. That is the power of the courts. Now let me ask you this. How many of you read newspapers here? How many of you read newspapers? Well, I hope all of you read, So, what was the biggest thing that happened in India in the last 10 days? Ayodhya judgment, absolutely. So, for over 70 years or more, at least in contemporary India's time, post-independent India, but even before, this dispute and this issue has fractured and really, divided our nation. We have had experienced, thousands of people dying due to riots and all kinds of things have happened. And finally, the Supreme Court of India had to decide the matter. Such is the power of the courts and law, where law is all pervasive, law is autonomous, law is independent. Now that doesn't mean law decided by the courts sometimes can also be wrong. So it is always said about the Supreme Court of India, the Supreme Court of India can also make mistakes, and they have in the past. And they have sometimes corrected the mistakes, sometimes they haven't. So the point which I want you to remember is that the goal and aspiration of law is always to protect the rights, to protect the freedoms, and to promote justice. But many a time, that goal and objective may not be achieved effectively. And it is your responsibility, as in our responsibility as citizens, to constantly work towards achieving the justice. All right, let me quickly move to another important dimension of law, which is about law also regulates human behavior. It regulates many things that we do. Several of you said that. All of us have our own rights and freedoms. But remember, our rights and freedoms are also subject to other people exercising their rights and freedoms. And so, there is a whole range of law called the law of torts or law of civil wrongs, which is involved in ensuring that if you violate my rights or I violate your rights, you have remedies that you can have. Not going to jail, but compensation and other types of civil remedies are available if there are violations. So that is the law of torts. You already know the law of crimes, which I don't need to tell you. The whole range of provisions of law which talks about criminal behavior and prohibits the criminal behavior and actually also inflicts punishment, including in the form of imprisonment, and in very exceptional and very rare cases there have also death penalty is provided for people who engage in crimes. That's the law of crimes. Then the law of torts, which is civil wrong. There's another area of law which in day-to-day life you will use a lot. which is the law of contracts. For example, you will be entering into, you will be purchasing things, you will be, buying things, selling things. The entire range of relationship between a buyer and a seller, even buying in Amazon, you're all entering into contracts, right? You go to the Amazon website, you buy a product, you are entering into a contract, a legally binding contract with the Amazon corporation. So contract law is all pervasive. Every day, every individual, we are entering into hundreds of contracts of different kinds. Sometimes we don't even realize it. And so when we enter into contracts, we make promises. We make promise about the product when we are selling, and the buyer makes promise that he or she is going to pay for it. And when those promises get violated, there are provisions of law which come into play. So the entire area of law of contracts is something which becomes important. So I want to quickly move to the fact that why even study law? What is so great about study law? Well, let me start by saying that the Indian freedom movement was led by lawyers. One of the greatest lawyers of the last century is a man by name Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi was a distinguished lawyer who led the freedom movement. Our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, was a lawyer. Our first President of India, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, was a lawyer. Our first Law Minister, Dr. Ambedkar, was a lawyer. In fact, lawyers led the freedom movement for us and laid the foundations of the Indian Republic and also enabled us to give ourselves a constitution which starts with the words, "We the people of India." So such was the extraordinary transformative role of lawyers who laid the foundations of Indian Republic. Now that was the role of lawyers, say, over 70 years ago. Today, lawyers are called upon to perform tasks relating to essentially enforcement of contracts, but also, most importantly, developing businesses. How many of you want to do business? Entrepreneurs, study BCom, BBA, BA Economics, Chartered Accountancy, the whole range of business careers and studies. All right, the most important thing that you will discover in your business aspiration is law. Law is going to determine how effectively you can conduct your business, because so many laws are regulating business in our country and all over the world. I'm not only talking about the enforcement of contract. If you're going to be a manufacturer, the safety standards that are required for ensuring that. If you are going to be engaged in any industry, environmental requirements are there, compliance is there, regulations are there. So the idea of law is all pervasive. I also want to mention that law is also an empowering dimension. It has an empowering dimension of dispute resolution, meaning if you do get into trouble, law provides opportunities for solving your problems. It also provides opportunities for ensuring that you don't get into legal troubles. The same law which creates those obligations also creates opportunities for solving those disputes as well. Now, one of the things that I want you to know is that there was a point of time, if you become a lawyer, you will end up wearing a black coat and go to a court of law, maybe in Sonipat or elsewhere. But today, most lawyers don't do that. Lawyers are into corporate law, financial law, trade law, investment law, intellectual property rights law, cyber law, and a whole range of other areas. They are into corporate transactions. They work for multinational corporations. They work in corporate law firms. They work as in-house counsel. So the commercial aspects of law has dominated the discourse of law in the last, say, 25 years. If you're not interested in that aspect of law, there are a whole range of areas surrounding constitutional law, administrative law, human rights law, international law, family law, or labor law, these areas of law which can enable you to be a litigator, a lawyer, a judge in a court of law. You can also work as at a NGO, at a think tank, at a research institution, in human rights organizations, at the United Nations organization. Law as a study and as a vocation enables you to pursue a range of options and opportunities that did not exist, barely 2 decades ago, more than ever. I also want to mention that one of the things which people don't realize now is that law is going to be one of the most attractive careers for the future in terms of job opportunities. You must be aware that over 70% of engineers in our country are unemployed. There has been a significant expansion in that sector, and there are not enough jobs available. And so is the case with many other disciplines. But law is only beginning to take off in our country. It's only going to develop more and more and more because, there's a very simple reason, because the future of our country will depend upon our ability to build a rule of law society, our ability to strengthen our democratic institutions to enforce the law, our ability to ensure that our business organizations and our corporations are following the law, our ability to ensure that the government agencies and regulatory bodies are creating an enabling environment for the enforcement of law. And who is going to manage all of this? Law graduates, lawyers who are familiar with it. So one of the biggest future that we have in India is for the field of law. Lastly, I want to say that, how many of you in this room would like to change the world for the better? How many of you would like to change the world for the better? Come on. I'm not saying you have to become Mother Teresa. You could. All of us would like to make the world a better place, right? I mean, you want to, if there are problems that we are facing in the environment, you want to do something about air pollution, you want to help others, you want to make the world a better place, right? Yes or no? Yes, sir. Very good. So if you want to make the world a better place, regardless of whichever profession, I believe you change the world through law, but some of you can change the world through business, some of you can change the world through other disciplines. But the aspiration to change the world for the better is something I want you to be deeply committed to, regardless of whatever you are doing. So with those words, I want to move into the Q&A session, but I want to say that law is one of the most empowering disciplines that will help you to understand society better, that will help you to understand the functioning of the government better, that will help you to ensure that the business thrives in our country, that will help you to ensure that justice is done for the people who are most of the time marginalized, who are affected, who are vulnerable in various forms of vulnerability. Such is the empowering dimension of the discipline of law. I would encourage you to pursue law as a study and as a career. Later this afternoon, after a few minutes, later this morning, Professor Anand Mishra will talk to you about the program itself. We have, as I said before, in our law school, 3 different programs: the integrated BA LLB, the integrated BBA LLB, and the BA in Legal Studies Honours program. We also have a business school which has the 3-year BBA Honours and the 5-year BBA MBA Honours. We have the School of International Affairs where we have a BA in Global Studies and a BA in Political Science Honours. We have a School of Government and Public Policy which has a BA in Economics Honours and a BA in Social Science and Policy. We have a journalism school which has a BA in Journalism Honours program. We have a School of Liberal Arts and Humanities which has a BA in Liberal Arts. We have an architecture school which has a BArch program, and we have a School of Banking and Finance which has a BCom Honours program. All the program details, can we give copies of the full brochure? All right. the full brochure, right? So your brochure has all information. Before I leave this hall, I'm going to invite you to ask any questions from whatever I have said. The floor is open, and thank you very much. Any questions? Any questions?
Excuse me, sir.
Please.
Here. So you talked about several branches of law, but you did not tell us about criminal law. Sir, so is it basically working in a corporate sector, or is that a complete separate branch?
So, thank you very much for that question. I briefly mentioned, but I'm happy to talk to you more about it. So, criminal law is a very important area of law because it governs the behavior of individuals and the consequences that might arise on account of breach of the laws. So, one important distinction you want to make is that when you commit a criminal offense, those offenses are not only against the individual, but they are against the state. So these are offenses against the state, and immediately the law enforcement machinery will take you into custody if you're violating the criminal law. But most important principle of criminal law is that you are presumed to be innocent until the guilt is proven. That means that everybody has an opportunity to defend himself or herself and to get justice in that process. I believe that criminal law is going to be an evergreen area of practice. I would like to say that human beings will at some point stop committing crimes, but that's not going to be the case. There will be always crimes, and so long as crimes are there in society, but the nature of crimes may change. There may be people who are committing cyber crimes, for example, new areas of law where cyber crime is involved. That could be a challenge as well.
Thank you, sir.
Next question. So I'm going to request my colleague Professor Anand Mishra to take this forward now. I want to say that it's been a wonderful pleasure for me to see all of you on campus. I hope you'll get a good tour of the campus. I want to take this moment to thank all the teachers of your schools who have taken this pain and effort to actually come and be part of this visit today. And please continue the discussions. In particular, I'm going to ask Professor Anand Mishra to talk to you about the admissions procedure, the entrance examination, the selection process, the international programs, the scholarships. Over 50% of our students are on scholarship. How you can be part of that, how you can get a scholarship that will help you to study at General. All this information Professor Mishra will give you. Thank you very much and best wishes.